So Fox News host Stuart Varney invited retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor over onto a program he hosts over on Fox Business. And, of course, he's doing the typical Fox News thing that Fox News does 99% of the time, which is, cheer on war. They're obviously very right-wing. One of the only... Honestly, there's probably only a few people that you'll probably hear ever differ from the pro-war narrative over there, Tucker Carlson being one of them. But Stuart Varney's doing the typical thing and I've seen this guy before. He's a pretty pompous actor, in my opinion. You hear a lot of things he says just doesn't seem to have any sort of genuine concern for what real working class people go through. It's all about make the rich richer when you listen to this guy. That's why he's actually on Fox Business. But he brought, again, retired colonel from the Army, Douglas Macgregor, over to give his input on what's going on right now in this war between Ukraine and Russia. And what this guy says might actually surprise you. Let's take a listen to that.
Let's go straight to retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who joins us now. Sir, what's the strategy? Putin attacks a nuclear power plant. What's the strategy behind that? Is it just to intimidate civilians?
The strategy was not to attack any power plants or the power grid. The Russians have very carefully avoided interrupting any power. No damage to communications, no damage to any of the things that are essential, like the water supply. What you're seeing is that the Russians have now driven what is left of the Ukrainian forces, who are taking refuge in population centers, cities, because they have no mobility, no air defense, no air cover, no logistical infrastructure. They are now mingling with the population, much as we've seen in the Middle East. Whenever we drove the Islamists out of business, they ran into cities, used people as shields, the civilian population, and tried to avoid being annihilated. And I think that's essentially what's happening today with the population being used by the Ukrainian forces to avoid destruction.
Now, pay attention to what he just said right there, okay? Because I think that's a very important fact. And we hadn't even gotten to the good stuff yet. But this is something like a buddy of mine, Reed, brought up when we were just on Frank Analysis the other night. Shout out to the Naturalist Capitalist and Frank Analysis. But as he brought up, what you're hearing over here is how great Ukraine's doing, okay? And he's going to bring up some of the things you've been told over here that just aren't true, like the whole ghost of Kiev or whatever, or Kiev, as I'm hearing some people call it now, right? You're hearing that, and it turns out there just seems to be no evidence that story is true at all. You're hearing all these stories, and it seems like each one of them can be debunked. And meanwhile, mainstream media will try to debunk everything under the sun when you're actually trying to find the truth on something, I don't know, like what was going on with COVID or the vaccines or the jab or the mandates, whatever, masks, where it started, how it originated. If you're trying to get to the bottom of that stuff and you start getting into anything that doesn't seem to have a lot of evidence to back it up, social media will be all over censoring what you say. Mainstream media will be talking about these conspiracy theorists and how this is dangerous misinformation, yet they're literally pushing around misinformation about what's actually taking place right now, and that's not being debunked by the reliable sources. It's actually being promoted. What's really taking place, if you really look into it, it seems like, is they're really not doing quite so hot. And on top of that, a lot of the forces are being forced to, at this point, retreat into civilian areas. So now Putin's going after the armaments. So when he winds up attacking armaments, he winds up hitting things in people's backyards, in their neighborhoods. Therefore, it's causing civilian casualties in the mix as well, which I am not condoning. That is an absolute terrible thing, but that's what's taking place at this point, and that's why those targets are being hit. So that's a very good point that he's bringing up right there. Let's hear the rest of what he's got to say.
I think Putin will pull what I would call a Grozny. Grozny was the capital of this breakaway republic. He flattened it when the civilians resisted.
Yes.
You're going to see this. I mean, is he going to flatten Ukraine?
No, absolutely not. In fact, he's worked hard to capture most of it intact. Surprisingly little damage, frankly, Stuart. Much less damage than we inflicted on Iraq when we went into it, either in '91 and again in 2003. Now, I think they're just surrounding the Ukrainian forces, and they are annihilating them. And this is inevitable. And Mr. Zelensky, I think, is postponing the inevitable in the hopes that we are going to rescue him, and we are not coming. President Biden has made that very clear.
You think the end is in sight?
Well, the end, the end of this phase is still a few days away. But the first 5 days, Russian forces, I think, frankly, were too gentle. They've now corrected that. So I would say another 10 days, this should be completely over. But the question is, what is it that Zelensky is going to do? The Russians have made it very clear what they want is a neutral Ukraine. This could have ended days ago if he accepted that. And then they can adjust the borders. But the eastern part of Ukraine is firmly in Russian hands. But again, the Russians are not seizing territory. They're destroying Ukrainian forces. That's their focus.
Colonel, it sounds like you don't approve of Zelensky's stand.
Oh, I think Zelensky is a puppet. And he is putting huge numbers of his own population at unnecessary risk. And quite frankly, most of what comes out of Ukraine is debunked as lies within 24 to 48 hours. The notions of taking and retaking airfields, all of this is nonsense. It hasn't happened.
He's not a hero? When he's standing up for himself and his own people? You don't think he's a hero?
No, I do not. I don't see anything heroic about the man. And I think the most heroic thing that he can do right now is to come to terms with reality. Neutralize Ukraine. This is not a bad thing. A neutral Ukraine would be good for us as well as for Russia. It would create the buffer that, frankly, both sides want. But he's, I think, being told to hang on and try to drag this out, which is tragic for the people that have to live through this.
I'm inclined to disagree with you, Colonel, but, you know, we'll see how this works out. Colonel Douglas Macgregor.
So, I mean, notice some of the key points that he brought up, right? He talked about that if Ukraine remained neutral, both sides would have the buffer zone that they want. And a buffer zone, it's kind of like that barrier in the middle. They can't just cross straight over into your border. And by your border, obviously, they could cross straight over into Ukraine. Ukraine being the buffer zone. So the NATO stuff over here, Russia over here. They couldn't just cross straight into the exact territory. There is a buffer zone in the middle. That's not a bad thing. Also, he pointed out something no one in mainstream media seems to want to bring up right now, which is the fact Putin has already laid out what his terms are for why he will stop the attack. Now, some people say he could be lying about this, but, I mean, how do you know unless you try to sit down and potentially work the deal out? And now, if you don't know what his list of demands are, here they are right on the screen. Take a look at them right now. So the list of demands here seem to be fairly simple. A constitutional amendment ruling out membership of any blocs, such as NATO, cease military action, we'll come back to that in a second, recognize Crimea as Russian, it's pretty much been theirs for, 7-8 years now anyway, so, and recognize Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. So absolutely nothing that I read right there seems like an unreasonable demand from my point of view, anyway. But at the same time, keep in mind, like, stop military action, recognizing those two as independent states, that is a lot of what's going on right here, because Ukraine has been shelling those people for some time because they've been trying to leave Ukraine. They don't want to be part of that country ever since the coup that took place around 2014, 2015 that we backed or so, and they're absolutely fed up with it. So that's the military action in a large part he's referring to as well. But now, of course, this guy, he's not toting the mainstream media talking points. He's not repeating what, the State Department and mainstream media is wanting him to say to help cheer on the continuation of this, potentially, I guess at some point, even the U.S. doing something. He's not towing the party line. And so is there a surprise that now mainstream media news outlets are attacking this guy for the things that he has said? And even someone like the Rolling Stone, okay? Rolling Stone put out an article. You can see this the picture right here on the screen. And this is their headline. Fox News invasion expert is a Trump-appointed Putin propagandist who thinks Russia is being too gentle. First of all, yes, Trump in the final days of the Trump administration, or final months, I guess, right around election time, I believe it was, right, tried to appoint this guy to be ambassador of Germany. The Senate blocked it, didn't allow it to happen, and within a couple of months, Biden took office. So there's that. Yeah, he was Trump appointed at one point. But a Putin propagandist? What's your evidence? What's your evidence? That he doesn't support what you think? What's your evidence that this guy is either going out of his way as a hobby to push propaganda specifically to please Vladimir Putin, or is just being paid by Putin as some sort of agent of Russia? Like, where is your proof to these claims, Rolling Stone? See, I would call that misinformation. More so than that, you're accusing not only an Army colonel, but a veteran and a Bronze Star recipient of being a Putin propagandist at this point. So does this tell you just how little shame the mainstream media has? I mean, is there a possibility a veteran could become a corrupted person? Sure. We've seen it. I mean, it's absolutely possible. It doesn't mean they will forever serve the United States their best, but I'm not seeing anything from this guy, at least from that clip, or what he's talking about from the other things I've seen pertaining to the subject of Russia, that he's being anti-American. I think he's just simply pointing out a truth mainstream media doesn't want to talk about. And the only thing I really haven't heard him bring up yet is the fact that a lot of the Azov battalion in Ukraine consists of neo-Nazis. I think that's the only real key detail I've heard him leave out of this conversation, okay, that contributes to a lot of what's taking place right now. And remember, the Russians don't really find Nazis all that appealing, considering during World War II, about 20 million Russians died fighting the Nazis? Why would they have an affection for that group of people? They absolutely don't like Nazis, okay? And again, that's probably the only thing I think this guy hasn't brought up yet. But now they're going out of their way to smear a retired Army colonel and Bronze Star recipient because he's actually got the guts to say something that mainstream media as a whole doesn't really want being told right now. They want you to beat the war drums. They want you to cheer this mess on, okay? Which is, if you think about it, it's pretty sickening, because if you could end this conflict by recognizing the independency, I guess, of two parts of Ukraine, the Donbass region, if you could give them their independence, leave them alone, recognize Crimea as being Russian, considering you tried to really pull some shifty fucking shenanigans a little short of 10 years ago. That's why they took Ukraine after the coup that we backed in Ukraine. That's why they took Crimea, not took Ukraine. There's a reason they said Crimea is ours. So recognize it's theirs at this point. Give those two places their independence. Stop the military action and say you're not joining NATO, and this could be over. The hell, okay? So there's a lot of things going on right here. This is typical. I haven't studied a ton into this Colonel Macgregor, but the few things I've looked up, it seems like the typical partisan, we're going to attack you and smear you if you don't toe the party line type stuff. But let me know what you guys think. What do you think about what's coming out from this? What do you think about what Colonel Macgregor said on Fox News? What do you think about Stuart Varney's reaction to it? And what do you think about these mainstream media outlets and people like the Rolling Stone trying to smear this guy for just telling a truth no one else wants to talk about on corporate news these days? Let me know what you think about it. Drop the comments in the comment box down below. And if you like this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. It definitely will help us out in the algorithm, and we've already got enough trouble there. If you're just finding the channel, you like what we talked about, you want to hear some more of these future videos, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so that they'll tell you when we release them. Otherwise, you'll never know. But we appreciate your support. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you're all doing well, and hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone.